The community guideline strike I got, all ironically pertaining to MH17, the just complete BS lies across the mainstream media on the grounds of its disappearance. Hey everybody, Justin Woolley coming in. So I got sent some cool information, having some deja vu here with some remote controlled airplane crashes, which were done several years and leading right up to 9/11. They had remote control airplane crashes that the military was doing and the rest of it. And here's one that was televised earlier this year in the US, Germany, and the UK. Oh yes, we got some footage of that for you. I'll go ahead and roll that right now. So yeah, there you go. And another interesting thing is that the Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was never really found, was it? Kind of ironic in this age of ground penetrating radar, satellites that can zoom in on stuff like, Google Earth and the rest of it. And not to mention all the drones they've got running around that can take very high resolution pictures, like the Global Hawks and the rest of it, that can take very high resolution pictures of whole freaking major metropolitan areas and break your Fourth Amendment with that. But, they're willing to break your Fourth Amendment, spy on you, but heck, if they can't find a massive passenger plane. So yes, that went missing the 8th of March of this year. And the question is did they take that now disappeared plane, that off the books plane, assumed wrecked somewhere in the middle of the ocean plane, which they never really actually found any evidence of? Did they take that, paint it up, retrofit it with some remote control hardware, and then crash it over the Ukraine to try and blame Putin for a whole bunch of different stuff and call it Malaysian Airlines Flight 17? Is that what they did? Because we know they used remote control airplanes for 9/11. Oh, wait, you didn't know about that? Oh, well, let me go ahead and roll this film for you.
If you look at the routes of the hijacked planes on the morning of 9/11, you see that they didn't fly directly to their intended targets. Actually, none of the 4 planes chose a short flight path. Instead, they were all piloted in long detours and loops to New York and Washington. But why? Wasn't it a great risk for the hijackers to be captured by fighter jets on their strange and time-consuming detours? Why took they such an unnecessary risk? The 9/11 Commission didn't even ask the question, although there seems to be a reasonable solution. If you transfer the flight routes onto a map with a radar coverage of the northeastern United States, you see that 3 of the 4 flights directed their detours exactly to so-called radar gaps, meaning areas with extremely poor radar coverage. Only there the transponders were switched off. The transponder signal transmits the airliner's identity, speed, and altitude to air traffic controllers. Without that signal, the controllers see, at best, only a nameless point on their screens. Flight 11 switched off its transponder 7 minutes after the hijacking at 8:21, apparently exactly when the plane was crossing the border of the local radar coverage. Flight 77 switched off at 8:56. In this case, even the Washington Post reported about a radar gap, because the plane's signal was disappearing completely from the screens. Flight 93 also fits into this pattern. The plane's transponder was shut off only 13 minutes after the hijacking at 9:41, not earlier or later, but precisely when the airliner crossed a small area with extremely poor radar coverage. The obvious question needs to be addressed. How should Mohammed Atta and his associates have known the most intimate details of military and civilian radar coverage in the US, details widely unknown even to air traffic controllers in charge on 9/11? And how should they have known by minute when their individual plane had reached such a radar gap? Finally, why didn't the 9/11 Commission even mention this issue? Perhaps, one could guess, because it could lead to some speculation about the possibility of a central control. For there's a further aspect hardly going along with the official theory. The precisely simultaneous events shortly before 9 a.m. At 8:46, the first plane hit the World Trade Center. Only seconds later, at 8:47, the second plane changed its transponder code and thereby its identity. At 8:51, the second plane turned. At 8:54, the third plane turned, switching off its transponder at 8:56. So all these major events took place within only 10 minutes, orchestrated allegedly by hijackers actually unable to communicate to each other while aboard their individual planes. Then how did they do it? For they also couldn't rely on a fixed arrangement, because all three flights mentioned took off with unscheduled delays between 10 to 15 minutes. By pure logic, that leaves only two possible explanations for the strange simultaneousness: accident or a central external control of the planes and their transponders. The reference to a possible remote control sounds like science fiction, but it's not. As early as 1984, a remote-controlled Boeing was intentionally crashed for a test by the US military. And in the 1990s, the Pentagon was pushing hard to develop JPALS, the Joint Precision Approach and Landing System. Private contractor on this military project was Raytheon, one of the world's largest defense companies. In 2001, they were proudly reporting that they had safely remote-controlled a Boeing 727 in August of that year, meaning 1 month before 9/11. If and what difficulties would appear in remote controlling a Boeing 757 or 767, the types that had been hijacked, has not been reported to this date. That nobody could have imagined something like this before 9/11 is in doubt, however. In March 2001, half a year before the attacks, Fox broadcasted the first episode of a new TV series called The Lone Gunman, where a commercial airliner is crashed into the World Trade Center by remote control. The script writers named the conspirators as being part of the US elite, by the way. Their aim: new wars and a massive and permanent increase in defense spending. So long for the TV movie from spring 2001, watched by a huge audience. And not only civilian scriptwriters showed prophetic fantasy. Also the military regularly exercised hijackings in plenty of different scenarios before 9/11. For example, in June 2001, the suicide hijacking of an inbound flight, as shown in a 2009 released document by the 9/11 Commission. Not to forget all the war games on the morning of 9/11 itself that strangely included a hijacking and fake inserts on the radar screens of the air defense, precisely while the real attacks were underway. The pure amount of these unexplained facts underlines the need for a new public investigation of the attacks.
Well, there you have it, folks. Yeah, I know, right? Deja vu. Gotta love it.
A plane shot down over eastern Ukraine. What questions would you be asking at this moment?
Well, the questions I'd be asking is, number one, who could have shot it down? Who had the equipment? It's obviously an anti-aircraft missile. Who could have had the expertise to do that? Because commercial airlines are big targets, but by the time they got over that part of Ukraine, they should have been high. So it takes some planning. And the Ukrainian government has been quick to blame it on terrorists, which is, their name for the Russian insurgents. And there does seem to be some growing awareness that it probably had to be Russian insurgents. And there does seem to be some growing awareness that it probably had to be Russian insurgents.
Your opponents are saying that that's really part of a larger pattern with you, that you often avoid taking firm positions on controversial issues.
Now, how we determine that will require some forensics, but then if there is evidence pointing in that direction, the equipment had to have come from Russia. What more the Russians may or may not have done, we don't know. If there is evidence linking Russia to this, that should inspire the Europeans to do much more on 3 counts. One, toughen their own sanctions, make it very clear there has to be a price to pay. Number 2, immediately accelerate efforts and announce they are doing so to find alternatives to Gazprom. Russia has not diversified its economy. It is still largely dependent upon natural resources, principally gas and oil. And thirdly, do more in concert with us to support the Ukrainians. There has to be more help on their borders in order to prevent this porous border, allowing Russians to go back and forth, insurgents to do the same. Do more to help their military obtain better equipment, better training. The Ukrainian military under Poroshenko has been much more focused and more successful, but nobody kids themselves. If Russia really keeps weighing in on behalf of the insurgents, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And to put Putin on notice that he has gone too far and we are not going to stand idly by.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, I guess, the mothership in New York City, but it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future. I mean,
Showing how the CFR is involved here, and this time I'm on their own website, and here they have a nice little picture of the matters, one of their little topics here, and they've got their little CIA guys over the wreckage there, giving them the indicator that they'll scrub the site, which they have since done. All the evidence has been destroyed. Go figure. Also, I'd like to remind you that one of their issues is global governance. Yes, these are New World Order scumbags here at the CFR. And let's see how they actually have members from Boeing, a president from one of the major branches of Boeing, at their little congregation of criminals here. Oh yeah, leadership and staff. Board of directors, let's try that. Ooh, this ought to be good, isn't it? All right, off the bat, former Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. There you go. Central bankers already involved. Atlantic Media Company, NBC News. There you go. Already got the teleprompter reading propaganda, CIA-run media outlets there. Oh, here's our special little guest. This jackoff right here. President, Boeing Brazil, the Boeing company. Well, you got a president of one of the major Boeing branches there. Boom, right in there with the New World Order people, with clearly a hand in, and very concerned, I can see, about the Ukraine, considering they had their minions scrub all the evidence. And Mrs. Hillary Clinton, an admitted CFR goon, talking about how we got to have sanctions. And of course, within the CFR, you've got clowns like this. Once again, Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, former Secretary. You got, of course, the propaganda readers, and then you've got people from Boeing. Oh, whose aircraft was involved in this whole thing? Oh, oh, that's right. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. PBS News, more teleprompter readers. There you go. United States Army. Oh, well, that might be important to know too. So you got, let me get this straight. You got the central bankers, the military-industrial complex, the teleprompter reading propaganda sector, and a major corporation directly involved with their aircraft in this whole incident. All in this nice little cabal called the Council on Foreign Relations, which again talks about global governance. Hey, with Justin Woolley coming in. Well, the teleprompter reading propaganda networks are talking about yet another disappearing commercial airliner, much like Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, which to this date, the official story stands that they just don't know where it is. Unknown location. But we do know it just so happens that there was a high-profile patent holder for some very technological information that it just conveniently got disappeared along with that plane, putting the patent into the hands of the Rothschilds. Just how interesting that is. And let's talk about this premise that the false flag teleprompter spewing garbage propaganda machine media is talking about these days of disappearing airliners. All right. First of all, on just regular websites like this one that anyone can access, as I've accessed it here, Flight Radar 24 live air traffic. And you can find all these various different flights, pretty much everything up in the skies. Find it, click on it, establish a trajectory that it had, its current flight speed, all right, its track, its longitude and latitude, okay, its identification or registration ID, a picture of the aircraft, and where it's headed, and the estimated arrival time, time of departure. So this idea that all of a sudden, when we have all this commercially available tracking equipment, let alone what the air traffic controllers see, that these aircrafts can just disappear, nobody knows where they went ever, is absolutely ludicrous. And in the event that all this technology and tracking fails, okay, check this out, all right? The 1.8 gigapixel Argus system, the world's highest resolution video surveillance platform by DARPA, which is attached to the bottom of drones, okay? So for them to not be able to locate a commercial airliner when they have these drone programs that can literally just see what you're doing on the street from just like in the upper atmosphere of the planet, incredibly high resolution image and a live video that they can then zoom in on and see. Look at all these windows. I mean, literally, if they want to find something, all the technology is there. So this idea that these planes can just up and disappear conveniently with high-profile people that other high-profile people want disappeared is a complete fallacy. So now that you understand that much and that you can track any aircraft at any given time and understand all of its information, let alone what the air traffic controllers can do, and they have 1.8 gigapixel mega cameras mounted on drones that can see everything, including plane wreckage, quite easily. Let's look at the laughable propaganda from the mainstream garbage propaganda machine media.
Breaking news, an AirAsia flight headed from Indonesia's Surabaya airport to Singapore has lost contact with air traffic control.
Give me your insight as to, again, what is happening at that crisis center right now and those key bits of information you want right at this moment.
Well, if you talk about Asia's safety record, it's exemplary. They've had one incident back in 2011. Other than that, it's sparkling. Its safety record. So, and I have flown Asia many times. The chief executive of AirAsia is one of the most famous men in aviation. He is, of course, Tony Fernandez, who's also chairman of one of the English football clubs. Tony Fernandez is a very, very well-known man in the business, larger than life. He will obviously be deeply involved in what is happening now.